Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew, and tonight I'd like to welcome back to the show former CNN Science Features news producer, freelance writer, television analyst, and Planet X researcher, and the publisher of YOWUSA.com, Marshall Masters. How you doing tonight, Marshall?
All right, Chris, nice to be back on with you. Always enjoy being on your show.
Very good, very good. We got lots to talk about. There is a lot going on. First thing I notice right now is we've got like 52 volcanoes that are erupting or either on high alert. Now, I don't claim to know what exactly is causing all this. I have my theories. That's why I'm having you on. But the evidence is mounting that there's something going on. Let's talk about this. What is going on right now?
Well, I think this year is going to be a pivotal year. We're getting more observation videos. What I find interesting, people are submitting excellent at altitude observations from airliners. And of course, the trolls always come in with their nonsense. If you go to my website, and it's the best Nibiru observation of 2018, and there were 4 trolls, and they all said it's a flare, and I couldn't believe it. None of them spelled it right.
Right.
Stupid is as stupid does. They don't know how to spell the word. And then there were other idiots, and they're going, well, you know it's glass.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's the only way you're going to be looking through a glass window is if you're flying in a 1932 Ford Trimotor. All right. They had glass windows. And that's all they had in those days. Plexiglass is what's in airplanes today. And that's plexiglass optically is much superior to glass. That's the reason why if you want to get a big aquarium for your house, it'll be made with plexiglass as opposed to glass, because they want to give you something that is going, it's just, you just feel like you're in the water with the fish. The view is that good. So you can see it. We're seeing all across the world a lot of things that are going on, all of these earth signs, it's picking up. So we're moving more and more into a stage. I find this interesting because, I went through the 2012 lead up. Now, a lot of people think 2012 and the Mayan calendar was a hoax. And no, it wasn't. If you track our signs articles, what we found was that right after 2012 was a demarcation point. It was a harbinger. Good prophecy always has a harbinger, which is not a destructive event. A harbinger event tells you are on the timeline of the destructive event. And 2012 was a harbinger. It was not when the world was supposed to end. That was when 2012 came, and it was the ancient Mayans giving their descendants way in the future a way to do it. And the ancients liked celestial alignments. They were incredibly astute about that, just amazingly so. They knew that there would be a specific type of celestial alignment. The calendar would flip on that day, and it would be a warning to future generations. This is when you got to do it. It's like the Bible story, 7 fat cows, 7 lean cows, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So we have been watching since 2012. We've been tracking 2 empirical data sets. This is hard news reporting, hard science. And one is earthquakes of all magnitude. And the reason why we do earthquakes of all magnitude as opposed to a threshold of, say, 5 or above is the USG, when was the last time you remember USGS upgrading an earthquake as opposed to downgrading it?
It's very rare. Yeah.
Very rare. I remember when they didn't do that at all, but that's how they jigger the numbers statistically. And we're just seeing, a steady increase. It's like Coyote Roadrunner and Coyotes on the Acme rocket takes off, Well, Acme, ever since December 21, 2012, guess what? Coyote's been on that rocket. It ain't running out of juice. It keeps going. And 2018, in our Science 31 article on our site, yowusa.com, was the worst year in recorded history for earthquakes and fireballs, both categories that we track. And we do earthquakes. That tells us what's happening with the planet as a snapshot. Fireballs are important. People always talk about, well, you have the meteor shower and the Perseids and so forth. Well, yeah, that's meteors. Fireballs are different. Those are big smoky things that come flying through the sky. And so we're not talking about these little pea-sized meteors that we get in the meteor showers. We're talking about big rocks. And the reason why we track fireballs is that it's most likely telling us that there's as the Planet X system is approaching, which is the brown dwarf star at its core and planets and moons, it's like a bow wake effect, pushing things away. Like, you see those wonderful videos, Jacques Cousteau and so forth, and where are the dolphins? Right on the bow of the ship catching the wave, right? Right. They just love it. They get a free ride. They get a big kick out of it. Well, now you have this system coming through, and it's taking objects that are out there in normally benign orbits, dislodging them, sending them our way, and they become Earth-crossing objects, and then we're seeing these things in the sky. And so this is a real concern. I watch all of this in these steady trends, and we keep wondering, how long will it take before we get to a point where something big really happens and a lot of people die?
The mainstream media recently published an article, or it was rather mainstream, something like a 2,000% increase in earthquakes since the year, I believe it was 1918. So they're actually releasing a little bit of this information.
Yeah.
And, another big mainstream article that, recently came out was our magnetic north is rapidly moving.
Yeah, there's a lot of people following that. It's really moving. This is going to be difficult for aviation. They got to literally go in because the runways are numbered for magnetic headings. And so when you have the North Pole is moving so dramatically, they're going to have to start renumbering runways. So Jefferson, who does air charts, they're going to have to redo their stuff. Of course, for them, that's just something new to sell. They're happy, I guess. For airports, they got to go out there and repaint the runways. And you could say it's runway 5-6 right or something, and then next thing you know, it's 5-8 right, whatever the case may be.
Do you think you're seeing the beginning?
And notify everyone in aviation. So this is a rapid thing that's happening. Yes.
You think we're seeing the beginning of possibly a magnetic reversal?
Well, we're already in a magnetic reversal. All right, and it's like, for me, Chris, at this point, it boggles my mind when people go, when am I going to see it? We're seeing it. I saw it in September, okay, with my own eyes. And I have to tell you, until you see it with your own eyes, I could bury you in 10,000 pounds of photographs and videos, and you're going to go, well, let's see how this works out, and you're going to, because you haven't seen it with your own eyes.
Right.
Now, for me, I never questioned it. For the first few years I was doing my research, about 2005, 2006, it was in. And for me, it was actually a NASA solar probe that was, boom, that was the smoking gun. And at that point, because the solar probe showed that the sun was very in the southern hemisphere, interacting with an object that would be approximately inclined to the ecliptic by 30 degrees. And I'm going, well, if the sun's, if this thing is approaching, Nemesis is probably about twice the size of Jupiter. Very dark, difficult to see until it gets close, because it's shrouded with iron oxide. And that's really a concern, because when we fly through that iron oxide tail, that is going to make one heck of a mess on the planet. Any open water sources are really going to be affected heavily. It'll kill off a lot of whatever surviving plant and animal life there is. It'll cause algae blooms. It'll be pretty nasty. And then after that,
speaking of algae
we'll have
blooms,
a period of heavy rains. Pardon?
Speaking of algae blooms, we just recently had, millions of species of marine life die from the red tide outbreak. And we're seeing in Australia, I cover this all the time. There's fish dying by the thousands.
Yes.
They're blaming the heat, but this is happening all the time. We're having mass animal extinctions, and they estimate that 2/3 of all animals are going to be gone by the year 2020. 2/3 of all animals that have ever existed on our planet.
That could very well be. Now, one of the things that deeply and profoundly concerns me are the coral reefs. At present, well over half of the corals on the planet are dead. Half the coral reefs are dead.
Right.
And they're projecting that, I think, by 2030, there'll only be about 5% left. I think we'll hit to that 5% factor sooner. There's many reasons for the coral to die, but water temperature is really the thing. If the water is too warm, then the corals just can't take it and they fold up. Now, this is a real problem, because about 1/3 of the world's population survives on fish protein, which necessarily has to come. The reefs are these are where the fisheries. These are where fish varieties are reproducing, and if they're losing this, and it's a terrible problem. So this is putting food pressure on the third world in a terrible way. One of the things that, like, for example, people don't see it. You go to McDonald's, and what do they say? Our fish sandwich is made out of delicious pollock fish. Delicious pollock fish. I can't eat a fish sandwich at McDonald's. It tastes like grease. Like somebody just put a big wad of grease and a little bit of fish flake, and that's it. Well, the thing about pollock, when I was a young kid, I worked at McDonald's for a while, and then I got over that. And but that was when McDonald's made fish sandwiches from cod. And I'm going to tell you, those were absolutely delicious, beyond belief. It was the best sandwich McDonald's made, was their cod fish sandwich. Well, they fished out the cod.
Yeah.
Now, you still get cod here and there, but there's not enough in the cod fisheries to support a company the size of McDonald's. So they go to pollock. Well, what's the difference? Cod is a very deep fish. Pollock swims above it. They school above the cod. And that was the reason why when they were fishing to fill orders for McDonald's, the fishermen, if they happened to get pollock in their haul in the net, they threw it overboard because to them it was garbage. Nobody wanted it. Pollock was a garbage fish. It was oily, not particularly tasty. Nobody wanted to buy that. And they didn't even keep it for cat food. They just threw it away. So how many people today know the difference between cod and pollock?
Right.
That's how subtle this change is over time. And that's what's happening now. There's a lot of changes. People don't understand it. I am old enough to remember what a clear sky looks like.
Yes.
Okay. And excuse me for a second. God, this moth is driving me crazy. If you see me whack my screen, the moth thinks it's big love.
Yeah, he's part of the podcast right now.
Part of the podcast. So you go that. Now, the other thing is what I'm particularly interested in right now, and I'm following, are the freedom movements across the globe. This to me is more exciting than anything else. It's like people say, when are we going to see it? I saw it. You can see my videos. They're excellent videos. People like them. And I'll ask them, did you watch? No. When am I going to see it? And so how do you deal with a negative denial? Give it to me. I want the Mysteries of Nibiru delivered Amazon Prime with gift wrap and a nice card that says, congratulations, you get to see the end of life as we know it. That's what they want. They want to show that up on, comes to the door and they, look, honey, we got our Amazon Prime and it says we're all going to die. Isn't that wonderful? And that's what they want. It's crazy. So there are those that get it. And right now, I think the most savvy people I talk to are radio hosts. Because you guys got to do your homework. And you're hearing this stuff. So the one thing I'm never going to hear from someone like you, Chris, is, well, it seems logical to me that. Okay. Oh, does that drive me batty? He's like, it seems logical to me that. When I hear that, I hear it going, I'm stupid. I never got better in a C in any class because I don't believe in doing my homework. I want my Amazon Prime solution. And so there it goes. So I report it, I track it because this is what I'm doing. But my interest right now is the freedom aspect. And here's why. I look at it as a Planet X researcher. And the one thing that's always bothered me about the return of Nibiru is the Anunnaki are going to come. The Anunnaki are very real. They're going to come for gold, and they're going to come for women for their slave breeding programs. Gold is for their atmosphere. They don't need it for currency. They use gold because their atmosphere is affected by the flyby, as will ours. That's the reason why we have all the chemtrail spraying. We use aluminum for reflecting light back out into space. They use gold. And gold is extremely effective. Think about all the NASA satellites you see, and they have that very thin gold foil, absolutely tissue thin foil. But wow, does that stuff reflect radiation? All right. Gold is great that way. You see an F-16, you'll notice a golden tint to the canopy. You ever seen a picture of an F-16?
Yeah.
And the canopy is a gold. You know why? Because if they didn't take and put pulverized gold, like a gold talcum, into the plexiglass mix when they make the canopy, and they did a clear canopy, F-16 pilots would all be dying left and right from cancer like you wouldn't believe. because they're so totally exposed at high altitude with that cockpit design. But they put the gold, it's reflecting the light so that the pilots are not literally being cooked into cancer. So those are the things. Now, when the Anunnaki come, for me, it was always, the fear that we have been so dumbed down, slavetronics.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And how would we handle it? Would we stand up for ourselves? Would we demand our freedom? Would we succumb? Without any question, there would be mandatory chipping of survivors, things like that.
Well, you're right. Right now, there seems to be a mass awakening going on. There seems to be a lot more people kind of realizing what's going on behind the scenes, the hidden world behind our world. But at the same time, they're pushing the zombification of everyone major. With new technology, the more they push this technology like 5G. The more zombified we become. So it's kind of like, there's some of us that are trying to awaken, but they're trying so hard to keep us down at the same time.
5G to me is really high. It's up there where, old cordless phones were operating, but even higher. And the thing about 5G, it depends on the licensing plan. The frequency it works at is the same frequency where they develop radiation weapons. So they can actually beam microwave radiation and people just get completely ill. They're unable to function. So this is part of the spectrum that's been weaponized. Unfortunately, with 5G, while it has immense data carrying capability, it doesn't have the range. So they have to build more of these towers. And I feel sorry for people that all of a sudden are going to get a 5G tower right in front of their apartment window or something.
Right.
They're going to have problems with that. There's definitely going to be problems. 5G is not a blessing. And what even scares me more is China is really poised to take the lead on 5G. And God knows what they're going to do with it. But going back to the freedom movements, I'm talking about the Yellow Jackets,
right,
Brexit, and MAGA. All right. And these are the forgotten people. These are the ones that have been hurt by globalism. Now, there are the ones that haven't been hurt by globalism, or they don't know they've been hurt by globalism. A good example of the ones that don't know they've been hurt by globalism are these kids that are, literally living below the poverty line, so they don't have these bill collectors tormenting them to collect student loans, and the penalties and interest mount up so fast. That's it. They never get out. They can't take bankruptcy. They can't do Chapter 11. I could see where Cortez, AOC, she came in on that, and that's going to resonate. She's going to grab those people. I mean, I think if Trump had been smart, he would have come in and said, we need to completely rework this student loan system and free these kids that can't get out from underneath it. And there's got to be a path where they can something, or maybe go get a Chapter 11, do reorganization, get some of these penalties and interest down so that they can get into something, a better situation. I think if Trump had done that, he would have probably picked up a huge number of people. But he just passed that by, and that was a foolish miss on his part. But I look at the overall freedom movements, and I look at it. I don't get into the particular politics. All you need to know about globalism is globalism, very simply, is a redistribution of poverty. They take the poverty of Chinese families, export that into the middle of the United States to American families. That then creates a displacement of wealth in the middle class, where they import that poverty to. The elites skim that off the top like cream right off the milk, and then the rest they use however they want to use it. And so the people that have been affected are the forgotten people. And I see on the West Coast and on the East Coast and the coastal regions, there's a lot of contempt for them because they don't understand these people and what they've lost. They've spent over 20 years. This really started with the end of in the Clinton years, when Bill Clinton was in office. He put China in the WTO. He signed the trade NAFTA, and also Clinton got rid of the Depression era banking regulations, Glass-Steagall, that would have prevented the 2008 Great Recession. So the Clintons set us up for disaster. That's the reason why that's the reason why they lost. I remember, I have family in Ohio. I mean, if you sat down when the steel mills were going and everybody was busy, and you sat down to the table and you said, I'm a registered Republican, people start moving away from you, they didn't want to talk to you. Now, all of a sudden, those people are voting for Trump because the Democrats just walked away from those people. They were focusing on the coasts. And that is an important thing, Chris, because with what I am seeing with the Planet X flyby, where it will be the worst amount of death and dying, it's going to be on the coasts.
Right.
East Coast, West Coast. So the people that are saying, these ugly, smelly people that go to Walmart, they're principally going to be doing most of the dying. The ones that are going to survive are, the Make America Great people, because of where they're physically located. So it's an odd thing that it comes around that way. And I see a complete change in the body politic of the country, because all you have to do is take out the power grid. For example, if you go to my website, Radio Free Earth, or you can go there from my site, yowusa.com, and I'm talking about the need for survival two-way radios. And people go, well, I don't know, it's geeky. I don't know if I need it. And they don't understand is that in a post-disaster world, predators and tyrants are going to have wonderful two-way radios.
Right.
And if all of you got is a red handkerchief and a balloon, a bongo drum, this is how you're going to communicate. Tough darts, farmer. They're going to take you whenever they want. They're going to rape whoever they want to rape. They're going to kill whoever they want to kill. They're going to take whatever they want to take. They're going to slave whoever they want to slave. So if you're sitting here today and saying, who needs two-way survival radios to protect our freedom? Let's wait and see. Well, when everyone you love around you is dying because all you had was a red handkerchief, then you can tell your relatives, hey, bad call on my part. Next time I'll get it right. Except not likely you're going to have a next time.
Right.
So
now that's something that could happen at any time now, like say a CME occurs.
That's right. And I talk about this in my book, Radio Free Earth. We devote 3 entire chapters in the book to electromagnetic pulse, CMEs, all this type of how to deal with it, and different ways to deal with it. And you can mitigate it, but preventing it, it's difficult. But if you know how to mitigate it, there are little simple things that you can do that'll make your equipment last a lot longer. People will need the equipment. They need to communicate near and far. You'll see a lot of times where they have like these Baofeng radios, the Chinese brands, which are garbage. They got the life expectancy of a housefly. They die all the time, but they're so cheap, nobody cares. You know, it's a throwaway. That's it.
Right.
Well, when you're planning for survival, you got to think about, I'm going to go to a desert island, and whatever I take is whatever I'm going to have there. Do you really, you know, and there's only so much you can carry. So if there's only so much you can carry, do you want to take throwaway garbage that you're going to wind up throwing away, or do you want to take something that's made to last? These are the kind of things. So, you know, we're in the book, the focus of Radio Free Earth is, you know, buy smart, do it right the first time. But the main thing is that the two-way radios are important because, as we say, analog RF is the heartbeat of freedom, except no substitutes. And I put up an hour and 40 minutes of free video education so that people can see what's at stake, what kind of radios they're going to need as their needs evolve over time in a survival situation, and where to begin today for the least expensive type of radio they can get in, and immediately, you know, they can be on the air and working and doing something constructive in very short order while they're then going the next stage to amateur. Well, in Radio Free Earth, we're talking about the EMP Commission and NIAC. Now, the EMP Commission, one of the commissioners, this is the federally funded program from Congress, he just outright said, we lose the power grid, 9 out of 10 Americans are dead. That's right. It.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the other causalities. You know, we don't, just one causality, the power grid goes. That's it. And people think, oh, there's got to be an end of the world app for my smartphone. No. After post-disaster, this is going to have two uses. It's going to be a nice camera or a grave marker. That's it. So I think that my thinking is beyond what happens. I'm really starting to think about what I call the backside. After the worst of it, when we see blue skies taste sweet water once again, what's going to be the nature and the characters of the survivors? And I got news for you. They're not going to be millennial snowflakes.
Now, speaking of survivors, what do you think is going to happen to the elites in their underground bases? Do you think that the bases will survive what's coming?
I don't think they're going to do as well as they think. When I was writing Being in It for the Species, one of the things we found out from reliable sources that, you know, remember when all the sinkholes started up?
Right, yeah. Definitely.
It was new, and it was, well, the sinkholes for the elites just scared the dickens out of them. And the reason why was they started their deep underground military base strategy back in the 60s. And it was kind of slowly getting over. But after IRAS imaged Nemesis, the sister sun to Sol, our sun, and they put the pedal to the metal, and all of a sudden the boring machines are going every which way. They didn't anticipate sinkholes, because sinkholes can open up above their shelters or below. Either way, the sinkhole opens up, you're in deep kimchi. And so right now there's a dedicated department in Area 51. They study every sinkhole that ever appears on the planet, using every military and civilian asset they can find. You know, they go in with satellites, they're tracking everything. They're trying to learn as much about these sinkholes as they can so that they can try and mitigate or adjust for that. So I don't think they're going to do as well as they think they're going to do. The reason why they go 2 miles down, this is a very simple thing to understand. There was a movie Knowing with Nicolas Cage,
Right.
and which was quite a movie. It was a really excellent movie, and what he was seeing in that movie was a massive solar storm, CME, that just hit the face of the planet. And he just, in the movie, he said, "Is there any place safe?" And he says, "Yeah, 2 miles underground. That's where the dumbs are." So that's the reason why they're really deep underground, is that they're afraid of this. And this is a consistent drumbeat. You have guys like Ed Dames, Major Ed Dames.
Wow.
Back in 2004, he did his first video on the kill shot. And I had a chance, I took one of his classes. A sponsor paid the tuition for me to learn remote viewing so I could evaluate it for survival. And it is something that you do want to learn. It's a really good thing to learn, is remote viewing.
Oh, I'd love to learn how to do that.
Yes. Yeah, it's well worth it. And I remember I met him, in between class, and I walked up and gave him a copy of my book. And I said, "You nailed it. You had the big ticket." And he wasn't happy to hear me say that. And he said that because we both understand what I was saying, which was, yeah, 9 out of 10 are dead, if not more. We very realistically could wind up in a situation where humanity's reduced to 250 million. And we'll start we'll come back from that. And women, women will be making babies. We will be making families. These are the important things. The survivors are going to do that. And so the population will be coming back, but in terms of us ever reaching 7 billion again, no, not for a few centuries, because whoever survives initially they're going to have blue skies again. They're going to have sweet water, but there's also going to be radiation all over the damn place. We have these Mark I General Electric reactors that were at Fukushima. The design is inherently defective. They were able to actually, the containment, it doesn't contain. It's just, matter of fact, there was one of the reactors of Fukushima, it blew, and when they did stop frame analysis, you could actually see the containment lid on the reactor fly up like a plate.
Wow.
Right out of the sky. All 3 cores are down in the ground. Underneath the ground is a subterranean river leading out to the Pacific. And so it's a nuclear volcano that's slowly killing the Pacific right now. And survivors are going to have to deal with a lot of industrial poison and waste. They're going to have to deal with Fukushima Daiichi. We could have over 100 of those all across the country. Wherever there's fracking fields, the cases on the fracking wells will fail with the major earthquakes, and then that witch's brew of chemicals that they use in the fracking process are going to ooze right up, poison the water, poison the land. So the actual amount of the country that would be good in a survivable situation has been dramatically reduced with all of this. So the survivors in a post-Planet X flyby world for a couple of centuries, life expectancy will not be past the 50s. Now, people will start developing cancers in their late 40s and dying. They're also going to have a lot of other problems. There's going to be a lot of Look what happened in Iraq from the first Gulf War, where we were using depleted uranium ammunition, and it was very good at tearing up Russian armor, but you have all this depleted uranium all over the place. And in Iraq, the amount of deformed infants that are born is staggering.
Right.
And it's another Chernobyl. They have that in Chernobyl, same thing. And so we're going to have deformed babies. We're going to have a lot of cancers, a lot of other diseases. It's, that's going to be, and it's really a shame, because once Planet X passes, if we didn't have all the industrial problems, we could really, we could bounce back 100 times better than we could with the situation that we have today. So I am, in my thoughts, in my research right now, I'm really looking way out in the future. I am looking 5 to 10 years out, and what's life going to be like for those people who survive. And today, a lot of folks want to survive, and so they think, okay, they go to bullets, beans, and bunkers, and buy a bunch of boxes of stuff, put it in the garage. Well, no, problem's not solved. That's just a consumer thing. Buy something, you feel better. You got stuff. Like George Carlin says, we got to get a bigger house because we want to get more stuff.
Right.
And the fact is that that's not going to work well for them. They'll probably have a situation where their neighbors are going to beat their doors in, because no doubt they've been bragging about their survival supplies to everyone else in the neighborhood, and they're going to go, they got C rations, let's go get them,
Yeah.
And they're going to get there. You say, no, it's ours, it's for my family. And then, oh, you're a hoarder. Hoarders are the worst people in the world. Get a rope, hang them, and that's it. And people are, look what's happening with the politics right now. Truth is thrown away. And it's, when hosts introduced me as a former CNN science feature producer, I have to be honest, I cringe. I was with CNN back in the late 80s when Ted Turner was running it. And my God, it was a lean, mean news machine. And you had to have 2 verifiable sources. Today, 2 verifiable sources at CNN is A, you invent your source, and then B, you tell everybody you believe your source. That's your 2 sources at CNN right. Today. Yeah. It's a disgusting joke. Their audience share is significantly less, and rightfully so. But I mean, I look at the whole fourth estate, and it's gone completely off the rails. Everything's politicized, and it's all about distraction. But in the meantime, Chris, what's happening is happening. Just what you noticed with all the volcanic activity, all the earthquakes, everything that's going on. Now, and it's hard to pay attention to that when there's so much juicy propaganda being pumped nonstop.
Right. Now, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think our world governments are going to react, and the media is going to react when there's no more hiding it, when it's actually visible 24/7 in the skies, and these earth changes are to a point where it's disastrous every day? What do how do you think the reaction is going to be?
Well, look at what they're doing now. Like, for example, these boys from the Catholic school. All right, this big and he's just standing there, and this guy's beating a drum in his face.
Oh,
and
right.
They came out. It was an entire news cycle about these boys were the worst, slime on the face of the earth. They're children. Got an old man beating a drum, being a jerk, and he's a liar. And all of a sudden, he's credible. And these kids that are there and did nothing. I mean, it was like he just stood there with a pleasant smile on his face. And now what are they doing? They're saying, well, the pleasant smile was, you were provoking their MAGA fears and all of that. What they do is they get caught lying or perverting the truth. And what do? They double down on the lies and change the tune. So what we're seeing right now is exactly what we're going to see when this happens. I'll tell you what CNN's going to say when everyone's seeing it, and it's just at a point where you can't walk away from it. CNN's going to be going, don't worry, it's not going to hit us. And that'll be a statement of truth. And then they're going to go, we have nothing to fear. It'll fly overhead. It'll just be an interesting light show. Now, do you think CNN's going to tell us that we're going to have all kinds of natural disasters and a whole lot of things that are going to happen as a result of this because of the interaction of these bodies being in close proximity? Hell no, they're not going to tell you that. It's going to finally get to the point where a hell of a lot of people, tens or hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Think about you've got a super volcano sitting off Italy over there by Naples. And when that thing blows, huge death toll. In psychic, a lot of the psychics, I'll say the same thing. Vesuvius is the harbinger. When Vesuvius blows, then we know we're in deep kimchi. And that'll be our 2012, basically, is when Vesuvius goes. Well, you're going to have a lot of people dying. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to come on to CNN and they're going to go, hey, boy, blah, 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 blah. They're going to lie and lie and lie. And the reason why they lie and they get away with it, and I can say this as a former CNN news producer, why this network can lie is people want the lie. They want what they want to believe. They don't want truth. We're not good consumers of news anymore. We just want whatever we want to hear. And that's what we'll buy. That's what we'll spend money on. That's what's going to reward them. We don't want good news. We don't want to know that people are doing good things. We don't want honest and objective reporting. That's talking head and it's boring. My generation, we grew up with Walter Cronkite. Walter went on and that was it. Walter was on the air. You listened because you could trust him.
Right.
He was, especially when we were in the Mercury program, the Apollo program, he did an amazing job of science reporting. You don't have a Walter Cronkite anywhere in media today, nowhere. So what'll happen is when a lot of people are dying and people are going, CNN, you told us this wouldn't happen. Then they're going to bring on a whole new set of talking heads. And the new CNN talking heads are going to go, well, our data models were inaccurate and we have been updating them. And what we can tell you is that this is as bad as it's going to get and it'll eventually get better. When you hear that, dying time is near. That's when the worst of it's going to happen. CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, they are going to lie because the people that own those networks are going to be 2 miles underground and they don't want anybody to know what the hell's going on. They want everybody on the surface because, you see, for the elites, we're like rabbits. We breed. Okay? Give us a case of Ripple wine and a little bit of Prozac. We can work wonders. Okay? They know that. So what they'll do is they'll go up to the surface, grab who's ever left as survivors, and then breed them like cattle and use them and restore their dominance of the surface. So they want as many people to die as possible. And that's what, we're sitting here and we're talking, and frankly, let's be honest. I mean, it's like 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 of 0.5% of the population is going to be prepared.
You're right.
Okay. There are going to be those that prepare at their own expense and those who prepare at the expense of others. And they're going to be very, 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 very few. And so most of the people, and I hate to say this, most of the people that are watching your show, and if they're not really preparing, and you're living in an area like right on a major fault line, like New Madrid or Cascadia or San Andrea, you're on a coastline. If you're on the East Coast, when La Cumbre de Vija and Las Palmas and the Canary Islands, when that thing goes, and man, there's a lot of earthquake activity under the Las Palmas right now. There's a lot of microquake activities, not good. The western flank of that thing collapses. It's going to take a tsunami. It's just going to rip out the West Coast or the East Coast from probably the Carolinas up to Maine. And that'll, most of those, you got 8 hours. I mean, if you got the water coming in 8 hours and they say, okay, we have an alert, what happens to the freeways? Instant gridlock. Everybody's just not going to be able to move out of the way. And, I mean, saying jokingly, how long can you tread water? It's just going to be, people are going to do a lot of dying. There's going to be a lot of people drowning to death, and they're not even going to know why they're dying. They're not going to know that they're dying. If you watch the movie 2012, and if you watch it the first time, it's all the eye candy, which is ridiculous, because I was in the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was in a major event. And trust me, you can't hear yourself think when those waves are hitting you. It's like a freight train from hell. And, they're sitting in a car with a magnitude God knows what earthquake going on and having a conversation.
Right.
I'm sitting here, no, it ain't going to work that way.
Yeah.
But go back and watch 2012 and ignore the eye candy. Watch the subtext. Emmerich does a brilliant job of telling you how the elites think, how they'll organize it, and how people will die. And his subtext is right on the money. Right on the money. And
right.
So that's, for your listeners, go watch 2012. Sure, fine, it's an old movie by now, but still the same. Watch it for the subtext. And
right.
There's one line from that movie I really do love. We're all children of the earth. The little Chinese grandmother saying that, and that was a wonderful line.
Right.
So
now,
people,
where do you see us going in the immediate future, the next, say, 5 years? What do you see? What major changes do you see occurring?
Well, the next 5 years is really going to cover the worst of the flyby.
Okay. Now, do you think we'll experience a pole shift within this time?
There's really no way. I mean, the only people that know how fast this thing's going to move through our system are the governments, because they have the space-based resources and telescopes to develop what astronomers call an ephemeris. It's like, like a bus schedule or a train schedule, that the train or the bus is going to be at a certain place at a certain time. So, to be at that station or that bus stop. That's right. Like an ephemeris. We have right now, the object is behind the sun. It's difficult for people to understand, but it's moving on two axes, vertical and horizontally. A horizontal axis goes around the sun about every 360 days. So we will be slowly merging with it. Whereas the vertical axis, which is 30 degrees inclined to the ecliptic, that's a 3,600 lunar year period. And what we're going to see in the years coming ahead right now is eventually the Nemesis system is going to reach a point, and it's basic celestial mechanics. It's going to hit a point where it all of a sudden accelerates. When it's there's in an orbit, you have the aphelion and the perihelion light. Perihelion is it's coming up from the southern skies to its closest point to the sun, and then aphelion is where it's going back south again to its furthest point away from the sun. And where the Planet X system actually spends most of its 3,600-year orbit, the largest percentage of its time, is between the ecliptic, the plane of our system, and its point of aphelion. Because it's going south, it's going away from the sun, it's going against the pull of gravity. On the other hand, once it reaches aphelion, then it starts coming and it starts slowly accelerating because it's drawn to the gravity of our sun. But it'll hit a point where it does a quick whip. And imagine you go to the amusement park and there's the ride, the whip. You know, I mean, every park's got a whip. It's simple. 2 big turnstiles and a long belt going around. So what happens when you're riding the ride? You know, you're sitting in the car, and while it's on the long stretch going from one turn, you know, one to the other, you know, you're sitting there waving at your friends and trying to look excited, but it's terribly boring, really.
Right.
But then you hit that point where it whips, and it's like, woo, you know? And you get that sudden burst of acceleration that's really exciting. Well, that's the same thing that'll happen. It's going to, as the system comes in, it's going to hit that point where it whips around the sun. It doesn't go up to the point of perihelion and just stay there for a while going, oh, man, this is cool. Let's check it out. You know, no, when it hits point of perihelion, man, it's pedal to the metal, baby. It's rocking on as fast as it's going to go. So that changes the timing. Now, we're going to have a period of years where we will see it when it reaches its point of perihelion is when we'll see it during the day. Not right now, it's behind the sun, so you're only going to see it close to dusk, close to dawn from the ground. But because people are at altitude, their line of sight is different, but also they're above the chemtrail layer and the smog layer. So the sky is much clearer up there at altitude than it is down here on the ground. On the ground, we have all of the chemtrail spraying. It's, you know, muddied up the sky. And then when you're looking at it, you're looking at it through atmosphere. And so the atmosphere is causing lensing effects. So the object, like, you know, a little mirror on on your rear view mirror on your car, objects seem closer than they are or something. Right. That kind of a thing. And so that atmospheric lensing changes it. When it reaches perihelion, it's just up there all the time during the day. And then what will happen is it'll be up there all the time at night. How do we know when it reaches its point of perihelion? How are we going to know it's reached its point of perihelion? That is when it's like, think of the moon, okay? And you have the phases of the moon. And the phases of the moon simply is the terminator moves across the face of the moon. The terminator is the line that is the difference between the daylight and the night side. That's it. That's a terminator. So when we look at our lunar cycle, we see the terminator moving. All right. Well, when we see a terminator on one of the objects, and what we will see first will be one of the outermost planets, which will be Nibiru. It's a major planet, and it's the furthest out from Nemesis. When we see that, now Nemesis could still be behind the sun or far away from its point of perihelion, but Nibiru is going to be closer to us. Then we'll watch it arc overhead, and then we'll see it dipping down, and Nemesis will pass between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Nibiru will pass between Earth and Venus. That's what will cause what the Bible tells us is the 3 days of darkness. Okay.
Right.
When Ed Dames was talking about the kill shot, what Ed is really describing with the kill shot is what is known as a solar sprite or cosmic lightning. This is huge. When I was young and I was in the Army, I had a chance to actually fly through the Grand Canyon in a Huey, literally 10 feet off the deck, which was an amazing thing. And I remember flying, and even then I'm going, I don't buy this water erosion thing. It's just not working for me.
Right.
But that's how they say. Skip the Grand Canyon, go to Mars. The largest canyon in our solar system is Val Marineris on Mars. Massive. That is what was caused by a solar sprite, cosmic lightning. And it probably is what stripped the planet of much of its atmosphere and caused it to lose, its atmosphere, and a lot of its oceans just wound up going into space. So it could have very well been that it was a very pleasant, easy place to be. Now, the problem for us is when Nemesis is between the Earth and the sun, and when Nemesis is between, Jupiter and Mars, if we're on the same side of the sun when Nemesis is crossing the ecliptic, the plane of our system, it's going to be bad. It's the worst case scenario, or what I call Noah's flood. Noah's flood was a pole shift event. Best case scenario, 10 plagues of Exodus. And we'll probably have something that's almost a combination of the two.
Very interesting.
We're going to have, you take the plagues of Exodus, which are in allegorical order. You take them out of allegorical order and you put them into a scientific order, and it snaps together like Legos perfectly, beginning with the water turning blood red. That's the iron oxide in the tail of the Nemesis system that'll do that. And that'll contain Schrebersite, and the Schrebersite is going to contain nutrients that are going to cause massive blue-green algae blooms. The blooms then eventually turn red, but when you have these massive algae blooms, they create microcystin, a very powerful toxin that can kill men and cattle. So that's the reason why the frogs got out of the water, the fish died, they rot, you get the flies and the gnats. In other words, you can just go through and you can pretty much lock up everything that happened. The locust, for example, the plague of locusts. That right there tells you, just locusts alone, that this was not a story that was about a hard-hearted Pharaoh. The locust tells you this was a global event. Exodus was happening everywhere. And this is very well documented in the Colburn Bible. And the Egyptians, they had like a 9/11 report after Exodus, and that's where the Colburn got its start, and then eventually went from there to Great Britain, where the Celts took over. And they really described very well in the Colburn, the accounts somewhat parallel the Holy Bible, but go a little further. For example, the Pharaoh of Exodus in the Colburn is leading the charge and dies when the sea returns.
Right.
He's drowned. And the Pharaoh that comes afterwards is more of a quiet guy, kind of studious. After the Hebrews are in the Sinai and they're on their way for Egypt, it was really bad because they were terribly weakened, and the Sudanese were coming up from the south and other people making war because they knew the Egyptians had gold and wheat, and they wanted that. And so the Egyptians had to fight some horrific battles to stave off these invading forces, which they successfully did. So there's a whole lot of things. But why is it that I'm saying locust proves that it's not a story about a hard-hearted Pharaoh? Is what turns grasshoppers into locusts? Well, on their hind legs, there's a little spot, all right, a swarm spot. And when grasshoppers are getting into dense colonies because their food supply, they're all of a sudden, they're competing against each other for dwindling food supplies. And they're hitting each other. They're literally flying into each other, and they're banging on these little genetically programmed spots on their legs, hind legs, that triggers them to morph into from grasshoppers into locusts. And so that's how you have locusts. So there was a degradation of food sources all across Africa. And that's the reason why they had all of these tremendous plague, this tremendous plague of locusts. The grasshoppers lost their food. They were triggered into a genetic morph. They become locusts, and they do it. I mean, for a species, think about it. It's like when we get crowded like that, we turn into cannibals. We start eating our young. Locusts, when they get crowded like that, they morph, were grasshoppers. They morph into locusts, and then they go lay waste to everything.
Right.
You know, pretty clever as the species go. So these are the kind of things that we will see in the years that are going to come ahead. There's, and it's going to build to a point, but if we get hit with a solar sprite, you don't want to be on the daylight side of the planet when that happens. Because if you're there, you're going to be, you know, that's it. You're toast, you're atomized. And it could also create a nuclear winter scenario as well. You know, you have a solar sprite that hits the planet, creates something on the scale of Val Marineris. You're throwing a lot of dirt up and a lot of particulates up in the sky. That's going to make a mess of things. So we have that. And the thing about preparedness that I want people to understand is preparedness is not about a person, place, or thing. Preparedness is not about a person, place, or thing. Preparedness is a state of mind. That's preparedness.
Agree.
People say, I'm not going to prepare because I don't have the money. Yeah. Well, okay. That's how you want to die. I don't want to hear about it. But if you're preparing and you're contemplating this and these situations that you're going to be in, life can find a way. You can survive. The number one killer of people during the coming flyby will be denial. Denial will be the number one killer. The number two killer will be location. And the number three will be disease. Because you take out the national power grid, guess what? Your toilet ain't flushing anymore because there's no electricity to run the water pumps in the municipal system to keep the pressure up. There's no more water and electricity for the waste management systems to process it. So your toilets are eventually just going to plug up. All right. All the sewers will just plug up from everything because they're unable to move the waste. You're not going to, let's say you've got yourself a wonderful luxury condominium on a 15th story of a high rise. Well, you're going to have a lot of fun walking 15 flights of stairs with water or whatever you're going to be able to find in supplies. A lot of people, when they go out and they buy survival supplies, they're cheap. They want bang for the buck. They look at two things. They look at the price tag, and then they look at the number of calories. And that's it. Oh, it's this much and I get this many calories. I am so damn smart. Oh, I am so clever. I'm buying this. And they get it. They don't realize is most of those calories are coming from cheap carbohydrates. Very little protein in these buckets at Costco. It's garbage. And they don't know about it because over the years, at this point, I can't recall how many times that I was, are you preparing? Yeah, I got all my prepper food, got all my bullets. Really? Oh yeah, I got 10,000 rounds of 5.56. Yep. Now I got 100 cases of, of food. And, a lot of it is Kraft macaroni and cheese and whatnot. And I always ask them, I say, well, okay, you got 10,000 rounds of 5.56. How much does that weigh? How much does it weigh? Weighs a hell of a lot. Okay. And if you are having to walk out, you're not going to be able to carry your 10,000 rounds of ammunition. If you want to drive out, you're going to be carrying 10,000 rounds of ammunition, which isn't going to leave you with a lot of capacity for food and clothing and other things, because you're handling, you're getting ready to have your own personal World War III. Then, and I asked him, I said, did you think about that? No, I didn't think that far. Okay, stupid as a stupid does. Then I asked him, I said, okay, now you went and you bought all these buckets of dehydrated food at Costco. You're real clever because you looked at the price tag and you looked at the calories, and you are the smartest person on the face of the earth. Okay, Mr. Smartest person on the face of the earth. Did you try living off of one of those buckets for a couple of weeks? No. Why? Well, it doesn't taste good. Really? So that's your idea of preparing. Set aside something you don't want to eat with cheap calories, with GMO, with processed food, which is death food, because that will literally destroy your lower gut. The flora goes, and you blow out your lower gut. That's 70% or more of your immune system. And next thing you know, you're sitting there living on nothing but Kraft macaroni and cheese, and within a week, you're not going to be effective. You're going to be numb-headed. You're going to have the runs. You're going to have constipation. You're going to have gas. You're going to have irritable bowel syndrome, because all of this GMO garbage, all this sugar garbage, all this processed food garbage is death food. But, you know, you get the bucket, and the bucket is the price tag and the calorie count, and that's all you have. So it's really getting, you know, people have to be smart. And now, right now, doing Radio Free Earth, I looked at, of all the things that you could do, people have, you know, they don't blink. And they're going to prepare. They will walk in to a gun store, drop $1,000 on getting a Glock and ammunition and holsters and whatnot, and are they actually going to go to the range and learn to be proficient? No. You know, again, buy it, put it in a box, put it up in the shelf. You're smart, you're prepared. Okay. Two-way radios versus guns. Two-way radio gives you the ability to avoid confrontation. That's the big advantage of two-way radios. And that's what I explain in my book, Radio Free Earth. It's really important, because if you're in a confrontation, people have this naive image of things, unless they've actually been first responders, enforcement, they've been in military, they know what bullets do to bodies. Most people haven't seen what a bullet does to a body. And the bullet, hollow point, high velocity, and you get a 9mm hits you, it's going to make a piece of hamburger in your body about the size of that. Okay? Now, there's not going to be 9/11. There's not going to be a hospital. There's not going to be an emergency room. There's not going to be pain medication. There's not going to be antibiotics. There's not going to be anything. And if you think you're going to recover from one of those wounds because you watched a John Wayne film and you said, okay, bite on a stick, you heat up your Bowie knife and you dig out the piece of lead. You know, we're not talking about digging a piece of lead out of the body. We're talking about bullets that get in and shred, tear, and destroy everything. So I don't care where you get hit in that environment, your chances of living are going to be dramatically less. So you don't want to have confrontations. You want to be, and if there is a confrontation, Sun Tzu, you want to be able to decide where that is going to happen, when it's going to happen. You know, Sun Tzu teaches you don't go to war until you know you have the victory. You know, you just don't go out there and get, you know, gung-ho. So this is the reason why there's a lot of people that are just, even if they survive the initial events, they're going to be completely unprepared intellectually, mentally, spiritually, for what is going to be necessary to survive and get through. But I do see with the middle of the country, and this has really given me hope for humanity, is that the people that are laughing at everyone else are going to be the ones that, unfortunately, they do the most amount of dying, and I don't wish that on them. I really don't. They wish death on other people. I don't wish death on them. It'll be people that are in the middle of the country. These are the ones that watch their jobs go to China, their kids go to pointless foreign wars and come back missing body parts. You know, they're losing homes, they're losing nest eggs, they're losing savings, and everyone's telling them, shut up and suffer. We're having a good time, and you're paying the bill. They're the ones that are going to be the survivors. You want to see who's going to survive what's coming? MAGA hats. They'll be the survivors, because where are they at? They're in the areas of the country that are going to be survivable. And I have, for the last 5 years, I've been going all over the country. doing ground reconnaissance. Montana, Arkansas, Wisconsin, North Carolina, parts of California, parts of Washington State. I found places that were absolutely phenomenal, fit all the criteria, and ones that you would think would be ideal, and they're not. For me, like the big surprise was northwest Montana near the Canadian border, because all of the good land with good water is already in, it's in family estates for a century. What's left over is pretty slim pickings. And when we did our ground reconnaissance up there in Montana, I did 3 recons in Montana. And I just really got to the point where, I just took it off the list, because it's so expensive to find a piece of land that is going to give you what you need. Soft earth, rolling hills, and a lot of water. What you have there is mostly alluvial gravel and sand and rock left over from the Ice Age. And we were looking at properties where you had to drill a well 900 feet. Well, what the hell's the point of drilling a well 900 feet if you got to have 440 service to pull the damn water up? You're not going to find 440 service afterwards. Grid's down. So what you have is an arid desert in these areas, a lot of these areas. So these people aren't going to do well. Another thing I found is that there's a lot of Californication. There's a lot of people on the West Coast who are, and they're seeing the market cap, the real estate market softening, and they're selling their homes, taking the cash, and they're going to places like Whitefish, Montana, Reno, Nevada, North Carolina, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and they walk in and they sell a house that they probably paid 20 or 30,000 for, and they sell it for $500,000, like $1 million or whatever. It's amazing what they get for it. And then you go to some place like Reno for $350,000, you buy a house that would cost you $2 million in the LA basin somewhere. So they're moving out, they're skewing the markets, and it's causing a lot of hardship for the families in these areas, because in a family you're going to have the ones that are lucky and they have a house, but then you have the young kids that are coming up out of school, they can't find a job, they can't afford a starter home, they wind up having to leave their families and go further out into areas where the California people haven't figured out yet, and it's breaking up these families. What I see is that when things go upside down and sideways, what will happen is that you're in a town like Asheville, and they're going to be just mobs of people coming through. They'll go in their neighborhood, and somebody there that's local, always been in Asheville, will just look at the mob, point across the street, and just say, California. And then that's it. Those people are not going to do well. They're not going to be so clever. So these are the kind of things that I see coming as everything fails. But folks that are living out in the country, they're going to be good. And they think, the interesting thing is people live in the country, they know where the key access points are. And when you talk to them, they're saying when things go sideways, we blow the bridges. Boom, overpasses, bridges, they're going to go out there and blow them. And because they're not going to want to think of it like if you're in Reno, all right? What's Reno going to do if all of a sudden 3 million Californians are pouring in from the coast, coming down Highway 80? Not going to work out. So they'll want to go to Donner's Pass, blow the bridges, slow them down. We're going to see a lot of, and the government's going to do that. They're going to, these people are in dense population areas, are going to be contained because they're going to want to have the farmlands that are still productive. They don't want refugees pouring through those farmlands like locusts and tearing up everything and taking whatever they want. And so that's the kind of violence, that's the kind of stuff. So location is the #2 killer. If you're going to do anything to prepare yourself, you go to a survivable place. This last year, I changed my strategy. You know, I just set myself up so I can go mobile and get out of there. But you got to start thinking your way through it. You don't take the cheap consumer shortcuts. You really have to you have to think through, you have to do it. And you got to do it so that you can be in service to others.
Definitely.
That, if you're going to survive, you got to have a good reason to survive. And being in service to others, helping the ones you can, the ones that are worth it, that's what you're going to do.
I agree 100%. I mean, it's always best to start with improving yourself and work outwards. And you got to be prepared for anything. I mean, you don't know what could happen. And
right.
Marshall?
Yeah, all hazard strategy. That's what we call it.
Definitely. Marshall, I want to thank you again so much for joining us tonight. We're out of time, but that was fantastic information. I'm going to have you back on again because we still got so much more to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Always more.
All right, Marshall. Well, you have an excellent night.
You too.
All right.
Kapla.